on today's episode of Timeless Wisdom.
The believer in God has to account for the existence of one thing: evil and suffering. The atheist has to account for the existence of everything else. That's big. It has served in my life at moments of doubt to be a very, very persuasive argument.
That's coming up on Timeless Wisdom with Dennis Prager.
Precious metals dealers come and go. This is Nick Grovich, president of AmFed Coin and Bullion. We've stood the test of time since 1983. With the flurry of coin and bullion dealers coming and going, how do you know who to trust and what to buy? At AmFed Coin and Bullion, we value educated consumers. We want to alert you to good bullion buys in the market and help you steer clear of the tricks and bad deals. Call AmFed Coin and Bullion for a free coin performance review. 800-221-7694 or AmericanFederal.com.
Welcome to Timeless Wisdom with Dennis Prager. Hear thousands of hours of Dennis's lectures, courses, and classic radio programs. And to purchase Dennis Prager's Rational Bibles, go to DennisPrager.com.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dennis Prager Show, the Ultimate Issues Hour. Every week at this time, I talk to you about some great issue of life. And I can't believe I have not done this one. I looked at the list, and I have not done this one. It's the ultimate of the ultimate issues. It's ultimate squared. And that is God and suffering, called the problem of theodicy. Not theology, theodicy, D-I-C-Y. And that is reconciling God with all the suffering, the unjust suffering, the evil, and the tragedies of this life in this world. If you ask people who don't believe in God why they don't, or why they're, in other words, agnostics or atheists, that's often the biggest reason. How can I believe in God? All of these terrible things that happen, it seems like a random universe. And I understand that. I absolutely understand that people look at this world and they can say that. My argument against that is not specific to the issue of suffering, but I have two answers, in fact. One, all right, so you look at the suffering and that argues against God. All right, fair enough. Now I want you to look at all the non-suffering and all else that there is and deny that that's evidence for God. You can't have evidence in a courtroom that only argues on one side. There's something intellectually dishonest about that. I have no problem in acknowledging the difficulty of the issue of evil and suffering and reconciling those with a belief in a good God. I, as a believer in God, I fully acknowledge the difficulties raised by the built-in injustices of this world. But I ask those of you who use that as your reason not to believe in God to say, well, but there is another side to this argument. Look at all the good. Look at all that was created. It's a little strange to say X, A, B, C argue against God, but the D through Z don't argue for God. Now, if you want to say, look, there are arguments for and there are arguments against, fine. I respect that. But merely saying, oh, can't believe in God, there's so much injustice built into this world, I can't believe in God. No, that's not an intellectually sound argument. So that's one argument. I said I had two. I have another one, and then we'll talk about the issue itself. The other argument is taken from a rabbi named Milton Steinberg. I always try to quote sources. I think stealing ideas is, in fact, stealing. So often people will say to me, oh, Dennis, I'm going to steal that idea. And I think, yeah, but didn't you know it says thou shalt not steal? I had never understood why people think stealing an idea is okay. So I always try to attribute sources. And there was this rabbi, and I am paraphrasing him. This is a paraphrase, but it's a very, very powerful argument. At least it's been powerful in my life. And here goes. The believer in God has to account for one thing: the existence of evil and suffering. The atheist has to account for the existence of everything else. I would say to you that in a nutshell, that is the most persuasive answer that I have for the question of God and suffering. It doesn't directly deal with it, but it gives you the larger perspective in which to be able to believe in God. I find that to be a terrific argument. I'll say it one more time. The believer in God has to account for the existence of one thing: evil and suffering. The atheist has to account for the existence of everything else. That's big. It is served in my life at moments of doubt to be a very, very persuasive argument, because I cannot explain everything else without God. I cannot. It all came about on its own. So evil suggests there's a God, but goodness, evil suggests there's no God, but goodness doesn't suggest there is a God. It's an imbalanced argument. Utterly imbalanced. Now, as it happens, there's another argument, too, that those who say, well, there's evil and suffering, so there must not be a God. Remember, if there is no God, there's no issue of evil. The only time evil becomes an issue is if you assume that there is a God. Then it becomes a question, why is there so much evil? But I'll leave that one aside. 1-8 Prager 776. You're all cheating by calling before I finish. You don't even know what I said and you already called. But look, you have stuff to say. I understand that, and you're chomping at the bit, or whatever that phrase is. Chafing at the bit, chomping at the bit, chafing at the chomp, chomping at the chafe, chiffing at the chofe. And I understand that you want to talk to me about it. Now, let me directly talk about the issue itself now for a moment. There is no question but that there are aspects of suffering and unjust suffering, and that's important because there's also just suffering. There are aspects of unjust suffering in this world that seem to challenge the governance of a good God. They do, and I think people who, like me, who believe deeply in God have to acknowledge that. God acknowledges it. There is a book of the Bible that, in fact, deals with this question of God and suffering and unjust suffering. It's the book of Job, Job. And at the end of the book, after suffering horrifically and unjustly, Job asks God questions, but at the end of the book, God asks Job questions. And he said, Job, if you know so much, tell me, where were you when the world was started? Who makes sure that a mother bear takes care of her cubs? Who is the one that makes sure that a mother eagle builds a nest? Who knows what happens after the gates of death? In other words, Job and all humans, you don't know. You can't understand everything. My ways are not your ways, I believe it was Isaiah who put it. I want you to know that I find deep satisfaction, intellectual satisfaction, with those answers. I want to make this clear because this is something that a lot of believers and I differ with regard to. I have not only no problem in saying that I cannot answer fully the existence of so much unjust suffering with a good God's existence. I not only don't have the problem with that, I admit it, and I like the fact that there are religions that don't demand explanations for everything. See, for example, I do not believe when everything happens that somebody says, well, everything is for the good. I don't believe that. There are things that are so horrific that have happened to people, there was no good that came out of it. None. You're walking down an Iraqi street with your family, and you're all blown apart or brain damaged for the rest of your life, and there's no good that comes out of that. It's sheer, pure evil. Now, I blame evil on people, not on God, but I'm just explaining that I don't buy the argument, well, we really don't have evil because in the final analysis, everything is for the good. That's not true. I stare evil and suffering in the face, and I am prepared to say this. There are certain things that cannot be explained. Only God knows the answer to. Why a child is born with terrible suffering and pain. Siamese twins. I don't know, whatever. They don't have terrible, they have suffering, but not pain necessarily. I'm just giving that as another example. But I've given you some of the arguments that sustain me, like the Steinberg argument, and I will take your calls. Any challenge on this you want, because I do believe in God, and I do confront the reality of evil. This is the Ultimate Issues Hour on the Dennis Prager Show.
This episode of Timeless Wisdom will continue right after this.
Rising interest rates, stock volatility, out-of-control inflation. People are concerned about what the future holds financially. This is Dennis Prager for AmFed Coin and Bullion. There's no better time than the present to move a portion of your IRA into precious metals. You should know there's a right and a wrong way to set up your precious metals IRA. Mistakes could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in IRS fines. Call AmFed Coin and Bullion, 800-221-7694. AmericanFederal.com. That's AmericanFederal.com.
Now, back to more of Dennis Prager's Timeless Wisdom.
You're listening to the Dennis Prager Show, the Ultimate Issues Hour. An hour each week at this time devoted to some great issue of life. Doesn't get greater than the question of how do you reconcile all the unjust suffering in the world with the existence of God, specifically a good God. And I fully acknowledge that there comes a point where we cannot know the answer. And I find that persuasive. Me trying to understand everything and understand everything about God's ways is like my dog trying to understand any of my books. It's not available to us. This won't satisfy many of you, either religious or non-religious, or believer or non-believer, because you believe that there should be an answer to all questions. Since I know that we have finite minds, I can live with that finitude. And that's it. I can live with it. But beyond that, I blame human evil on humans. Of course, to a certain extent, I blame it on God, too, to be perfectly honest, because he created such a flawed being. I am not one of the admirers of humanity. I admire humans, but I have contempt for humanity. So, just as an aside, I've written an article on that, and I won't belabor that point now. There are terrific human beings, but humanity as a whole has a very unimpressive record. Highly unimpressive. That's why I always get a kick out of humanists. They can't believe in God, but they believe in humanity. What a crack-up. God's got a better record than humanity. All righty, let's go to some of your calls here. And let's go to Michael in Sammamish, Washington. Hello, Michael. Dennis Prager.
Hi, Dennis.
Where is Sammamish?
Where is Sammamish?
Yeah.
It's just east of Seattle, Washington.
Okay, I love the
Across
name.
the lake.
Go ahead.
This is really a great honor. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
It really is.
Thank you for the comment.
Just two things. I'll take your comments offline. First of all, I think we need to keep in mind that without evil, we have no way by which to judge what is good. So evil and good are kind of two sides of the same coin, if you will. But more deeply than that, God created us and desires for us freedom and free will.
Yeah,
And
you are, Michael, forgive me, you are explaining evil. The great question vis-a-vis God is not so much evil, but suffering that was natural. Children born with tumors, not the evil that people freely choose.
Right. I just wanted to make the distinction between the two kinds of evil. Because the second point was I think more an answer to your question. There is an assumption in the question that we are to judge, say, an afterlife by this life. It may be the case that God tolerates tsunamis because he knows that those innocent children will be in a better place. I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm saying that is something to reflect on, in that life as we know it may not accurately reflect what God's intentions for us are after.
Right. That's very good. That's very good, Michael. I agree with that. I agree, but it's a variation on my theme that we can't understand fully how God has made a world like that. The only problem that I have with that, and I do agree with everything that Michael said, and thank you again for your call, is that it doesn't. You see, saying that we go to a better place, which I have to believe. I mean, I have to believe it intellectually. If we die and everybody goes to something worse, that would really be a theological problem. But saying that doesn't answer the question fully, because you still have the problem of this world's suffering. All right, so that baby will go to a better place. But what about the parent of the child who was killed in the tsunami, who has to live out their life here with the daily horrific pain of the death of their child? So you see, I never minimize. This is something I need to explain to all of you. I never minimize the amount of suffering in this world, the amount of unjust pain. I believe deeply in God, but I don't allow myself to become intellectually weak by making the questions simpler or by denying the obvious. The obvious is that there is a staggering amount of unjust suffering on this planet, and that God made it that way. And if you say, well, you blame it on Adam and Eve, well, that doesn't fully answer it for me. Why would God make a world where all of my suffering is because of somebody else's choice? I believe that story. I don't know what the question of literal or not is not relevant to me, but I believe that story, and it's one of the genius stories of that ever was put into words. And I am prepared to believe even in the consequences, the pain of childbirth, the pain of bringing forth bread from the earth, but it doesn't answer all of the suffering issue, even the Adam and Eve story. Okay, and let's go to a good challenge here in Sarasota, Florida. Richard. Hello, Richard. Dennis Prager.
Hi, Dennis. A pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
I had just a question about a farmer, let's say, who has a great crop, and he thanks God, as I was taught to thank God for every blessing growing up. And it would just seem logical to be able to blame God for a bad crop or a devastating crop or a child lost.
There are two answers to that that immediately come to mind. First, it depends on what you consider to be the norm. If you consider good crops to be the norm, and that they just should be there for me, then you're right. But it seems to me that the miracle is not a bad crop. The miracle is that there are any good crops, that God made a world where we could feed ourselves as a gift. So I think that becomes the good crop is more exceptional than the bad crop. But your question is a good one. If we thank God for good things that happen to us, shouldn't we be angry at God or curse God or whatever is the opposite of thank for the bad things that happen? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, you're very welcome. Actually, I have no problem with people who get angry with God. I think that you ought to. I mean, if God is your Father in heaven, did you ever get angry at your own father? Is it not allowed? Now, it has to be within bounds of respect and honor and so on, but yes, you can express anger at God. You have a real relationship with God. How could it just be one unidimensional way? Back in a moment, I'm Dennis Prager.
This episode of Timeless Wisdom will continue right after this.
Precious metals dealers come and go. This is Nick Grovich, president of AmFed Coin and Bullion. We've stood the test of time since 1983. With the flurry of coin and bullion dealers coming and going, how do you know who to trust and what to buy? At AmFed Coin and Bullion, we value educated consumers. We want to alert you to good bullion buys in the market and help you steer clear of the tricks and bad deals. Call AmFed Coin and Bullion for a free coin performance review. 800-221-7694 or AmericanFederal.com.
Now, back to more of Dennis Prager's Timeless Wisdom.
Dennis Prager here, the Ultimate Issues Hour. It is the hour each week on some great issue of life. You know, it doesn't get greater than this. I don't mean great in the sense of fun, greater in the sense of importance, and that is reconciling God, the existence of or belief in a good God, with all the unjust suffering in the world. I have dealt with this my whole life. Anybody who thinks and believes has to deal with it. In the final analysis, just to recap very quickly and then go to more of your calls, there are two forms of unjust suffering: evil caused by humans and tragedy caused by nature. The nature one really raises more issues vis-a-vis the existence of a good God than does human evil, but the human evil one does too. Because the amount of it, the staggering amount of it that people have engaged in. You wonder, did God know how bad people would be? And you know, there are questions. You see, I have never found asking questions about God to be deleterious to my faith. It's never occurred to me. It's like, you know, asking questions about my parents. It's never quite affected my belief that they exist. Of course, God exists. The questions then become about his nature and so on. But the idea that everything came about by itself is so absurd to me. It is so absurd that it doesn't dawn on me that there is no God. It dawns on me that there are real questions to be asked, and I have to figure out answers when possible. But it's all one colossal bad joke? I don't find that terribly intellectually persuasive, never did. But I know that for some, the issue of God is a very difficult one, and they may not have been as lucky as I in making peace with God's existence. I know very wonderful people who just find it almost impossible or impossible to believe in God. So I think that, and I feel for them, because it's a richer life, much richer life to believe that there is a good God who governs the universe. Not to mention comforting in the deepest sense. But I have no problem asking these questions, and for some there are no answers. And I guess I should repeat at every break the great Rabbi Milton Steinberg quote. For the believer in God has to account, it's a paraphrase, but this is basically what he said. The believer in God has to account for the existence of one thing: evil and suffering. The atheist has to account for the existence of everything else. Please do remember that. Okay, 1-8-PRAGER-776, and let's go to Litchfield Park, Arizona, and Aaron. Hello, Aaron. Dennis Prager.
Mr. Prager, good day to you. How are you?
Thank you.
Wonderful. Great honor to speak with you. I kind of view it as, we are God's children, obviously. I mean, I love my children enough to let them learn by their own suffering one way or another. I know it's a pretty simplistic view, but at the same time...
Yeah, but there is suffering you can't learn from. What if you're brain damaged by a drunk driver?
Well, I'm not talking about so much this life, but I mean, what's eternity compared to a lifetime of suffering, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so your answer to the problem of injustice in this world is the next world. So it's, by the way, it's mine as well. I did wasn't it? Yeah, I did. This was very recently. I had an Ultimate Issues Hour on heaven and hell, and I said if there is a good God, then there is reward and punishment after we die. It's axiomatic, because there is so little reward and punishment rightfully done in this world. I'm with you, Aaron. I agree entirely. Thank you very much. Denver, Colorado. Eric. Hello, Eric. Dennis Prager.
Hi, Dennis. I think cell phones may prove that there's a God.
Cell phones may prove there is a God. And how is
miles
that?
Away from you and getting to talk to one of my favorite mentors.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Well, I had more to the subject. You know, the classical philosophical view I've been taught was rephrase the question a little different. Because God is all good and because He's all powerful, then we are already living in the best of all worlds. That's the macro view I learned from you. The micro view, I think, is my world, just where, I mean, I've had things very tough. You know, I had $1 million estate stolen by my ex-wife. She beats my kids with a whip and electric cord, and it's been enormously tough. She's now trying to get me thrown in jail, and through all that difficulty, I've learned a ton.
You've learned what?
I've learned a ton. You know, I've learned more about myself. I've become maybe a person.
Yes, there are. Yes, you have, but I'll comment on this learning from suffering when we come back. The Ultimate Issues Hour on the Dennis Prager Show. Amazing to me that I haven't addressed this on the Ultimate Issues Hour, and that is the issue of unjust suffering and evil and reconciling those with belief in a good God. It's called theodicy. It's the problem of, in a nutshell, the problem of evil. How do you believe in God? The last call, excellent one, and I thank you again, was for your kind comments, was about learning from suffering. Many people do, in fact, bring that up as one way of answering the problem, and that there's a lot of truth to it. I would say to you that all the suffering of my life has been an educational experience. I have learned an immense amount from that suffering. And sometimes you meet people and you feel that they really haven't suffered, although it's pretty rare, and they don't seem to be terribly compassionate, or if not even compassionate, I should say empathetic. They may well have compassion for people who suffer, but or not a lot of wisdom or not a lot of maturity. I mean, suffering has its role. There's no question, but there is a form of suffering that you can't learn. There's nothing to be learned from. As I said, you're rendered brain damaged by a drunk driver. What is it that you're going to learn? You can't even learn because you're brain damaged. I mean, so it's not. We who believe in God can't give facile answers. I believe atheists give facile answers. Well, we don't know how it all came about, but science will tell us one day. Everything came about on its own. How do I know? I don't know. But I assume it. And that's facile to me. Now, the agnostic, the one who says, look, there are arguments on both sides, that's a separate issue. But the atheist? I don't like facile atheist answers, and I don't like facile theist answers. We who believe in God have to be intellectually honest. Make a lot more believers in God when we're intellectually honest than if we give cliched responses. But having said all that, I do not believe that suffering says there is no God. See, it might, to those of you who believe that God will protect you. Alan, we should put that down as one of these ultimate issues. Will you be protected if you do the right religious things, or believe the right religious things? I've never in my life believed that because I'm religious, or because I'm good to the extent that I'm a good person, whichever one or both, that I will be protected from cancer, or I will be protected from a drunk driver. I just never believed that. It's not the way God works. It's like a deal with God. You don't make deals with God. As Harold Kushner, the author of When Bad Things Happen to Good People, put it to me very well in one of the many dialogues we have had. And said, you know, if a righteous man goes out in very cold weather without a coat on, he's just as likely to get pneumonia as an unrighteous man who goes out without a coat on. That's the way it works. That's the way of the world. All righty, and let's go to Charles in Los Angeles. Charles, Dennis Prager, thanks for calling.
Oh,
Oh, Dennis, thank you. An example of unjust suffering is that you're only on the radio 3 hours a day.
Well, yeah. At a given point, it would be unjust suffering for me.
I would imagine. Well, now, you mentioned earlier, your first segment of the show, about how you attribute evil acts to men, in the example of the Iraqi family getting blown up. But then you're also arguing that goodness, the goodness in the world, and the good acts that men do to others, to humanity, is attributable to God. So how do we reconcile that?
There was a breakup. Are you on a cell phone?
I am. I'm sorry.
That's okay. There were a few words. How do we reconcile the evil done by men with what?
Well, you attributed the blowing up the Iraqi.
Oh, I see. Okay. So when evil, I blame men. When nature does evil, I don't blame God.
Yes.
I see. Well, I do. I said earlier, there was an analogous question posed to me, and I absolutely do. God, you created a world where there will be metastasized cells called cancer. You created a world with tsunamis. You created a world with earthquakes, with the ability to have terrible plagues and the flu that will kill 25 million people at a time. And yes, absolutely. But why does that negate God's existence? That's why I have such a firm belief. I'm prepared to say, God, I really think you made a big boo-boo here. To which I then answer, Dennis, you're an idiot. You're telling God that he made a mistake? What the hell do you, Dennis, know compared to God? That's why I use the answer, Charles, about Job, where God says, come on, you don't know anything compared to me. But yes, I do. I absolutely attribute that stuff to God, Charles. You with me?
Yes, I'm here. So really what we have are two subsets of good as well as two subsets of evil. Those acts that are attributable to man and those acts that are attributable to God.
Yeah.
Would you break it down in that way?
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, exactly.
Okay. So then what we have, in fact, is the unjust or just suffering where there's the obvious cause and effect, to me, is suffering that is caused by mankind towards one another. The unjust suffering...
No, that's unjust, too.
Well, if you do something evil to someone else and there's a direct...
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yes, there's just... you're right. I got you. There's 4 subsets. Yes, there's just suffering and unjust suffering caused by man. There's just suffering and unjust suffering caused by God. Fine, that's exactly right. But I need you all to hear. I'm not scared of blaming God. I'm not scared of getting angry at God. Nothing. I have a full relationship in that sense. God has not asked me to abandon my heart or my brain when coming to him. And that's one of the reasons that I can make a persuasive case for God, because I'm not afraid of any questions. I've already posed them. And I continue to do so, and I get annoyed with him. We'll be back in a moment.
This episode of Timeless Wisdom will continue right after this.
Precious metals dealers come and go. This is Nick Grovich, president of AmFed Coin and Bullion. We've stood the test of time since 1983. With the flurry of coin and bullion dealers coming and going, how do you know who to trust and what to buy? At AmFed Coin and Bullion, we value educated consumers. We want to alert you to good bullion buys in the market and help you steer clear of the tricks and bad deals. Call AmFed Coin and Bullion for a free coin performance review. 800-221-7694 or AmericanFederal.com.
Now, back to more of Dennis Prager's Timeless Wisdom.
You're listening to the Dennis Prager Show. I've been talking to you on this Ultimate Issues Hour, which is every week at this time, about the great and vexing issue of reconciling God or belief in God with all the evil and suffering in the world. And I have been able to do so. Now, there may be a test of such suffering that it would break my faith. I can't know. I can't know. But I have deep empathy for suffering to begin with. And I have had my own, and loved ones have had worse than I. It has not I believe a good God governs this universe, and I cannot fully reconcile all this bad stuff with him. I acknowledge that. So what? What is my choice? My choice is to believe everything is a coincidence? My choice is to believe it all came about on its own? Intelligence comes from rocks? I'm able to talk to your minds and your hearts and your souls through the magic of radio? And all of this just came about. That's more intellectually satisfying? There's no comparison. And in the final analysis, I although my theology is different than his, he has had a big effect on me. Harold Kushner, in his book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. God doesn't stop the bad, but God is there when it happens. I love that. I love that. It's very, very powerful. Yes, God allows these bad things to happen, but he is there when they happen for you to reach out to and to bring into your life. I have a very God-centered life. I may be personal for a moment, but I at the same time, I never abandon reason. And I truly believe that there is more reason in a God-based understanding of the universe than in an atheist-based understanding of the universe. It is our task to reach out to those who suffer, to help them, to make this world a place where it is obvious that there is a good God. I wish I could take all your calls. Beth, Sally, Scott, Jane, Kendall. Kendall's son died from chronic illness and prompted him to be more compassionate, create support groups. God bless you, Kendall, and the memory of your son. Those of you who find these topics compelling, please know that I have many CDs on God's existence, on the meaning of life, and so on. 800-225-8584, 800-225-8584, or DennisPrager.com or PragerRadio.com. I hope this has helped you. Thank you for listening.
Tomorrow on Timeless Wisdom with Dennis Prager.
I would like to make, and I will indeed make, the case for marriage for men. So this should interest two groups out there, men and women. The case for marriage for men. Because a lot of men argue, what do I need this for? One of the ways they do it, and this is going to be one of my arguments for guys to get married, is it makes you a man.
Join us tomorrow to hear more on Timeless Wisdom with Dennis Prager. This has been Timeless Wisdom with Dennis Prager. Visit DennisPrager.com for thousands of hours of Dennis's lectures, courses, and classic radio programs, and to purchase Dennis Prager's Rational Bibles.
Precious metals dealers come and go. This is Nick Grovich, president of AmFed Coin and Bullion. We've stood the test of time since 1983. With the flurry of coin and bullion dealers coming and going, how do you know who to trust and what to buy? At AmFed Coin and Bullion, we value educated consumers. We want to alert you to good bullion buys in the market and help you steer clear of the tricks and bad deals. Call AmFed Coin and Bullion for a free coin performance review. 800-221-7694 or AmericanFederal.com.